I've felt a life where I could not find joy in it. And then I have felt such the polar opposite skiing down a run.
That's why we all love the sport, is it's a flow state and you got to be present and you can't think of all these other things.
You know, I think about grief, I think about skiing. I think about skiing as something of a vice. It's something that we did as a family. And it's this like piece of continuity that when everything else is going wrong, skiing is something that I feel like we resorted to.
The cotton clouds are dripping down like water mixed with ink to present a gradient from lavender to pink. No golden hours good, flooding all the land with light, but I much prefer the lilac round the night.
We had a really strong family identity as 5 skiers. Everything about our life in New Jersey was centered around spending time away from New Jersey. Every move made by our parents was with that priority in mind.
So we built this log cabin and planned it the way we wanted, tweaked it the way we wanted. It was like our little country club, you know, going to Hunter Mountain. We knew everybody. Kids became regulars, went to ski school. You know, Steve in his own way, you know, wanted to live life without boundaries and without conformity. And he never really had a fear of standing out, being, you know, weird. When he laughed, no matter where he was. And he also liked to goof on people.
Oh, that's my boy.
Now, Stevie?
The outdoor space allowed him to make some, you know, risk-reward decisions on a dime, but also see the long game, the big picture of, you know, this is all good. I think he always thought that he did all, you know, he jumped out of planes, he went mountain biking, he skied at a tremendous speed, that something was going to happen to him.
You know, on Monday, it was a normal nuclear upper middle class family. And on Tuesday, like, the world crumbled in.
This just in, you are looking at obviously a very disturbing live shot there. That is the World Trade Center, and we have unconfirmed reports this morning that a plane has crashed into one of the towers.
We don't know anything more than that. We don't know if it was a commercial aircraft. We don't know if it was a private aircraft. We have no idea how many were on board or what the extent of the injuries are right now.
I lost a dad that day. And like the rest of the world watched it happen on television.
You're like, my dad's death is this historical event that changed society, changed history.
On September 11, 2001, an inconceivable terrorist attack would take our Stevie's life.
It's an event that everyone else experienced, and it doesn't feel like there's a lot of room to process it as a personal loss, while everyone around you is also staking a claim to grieving.
Leading up to the 20th anniversary and having to actually go to New York, I think just loaded a lot more anxiety on me than I thought it would. Obviously, going to where my dad died is hard. The 20th anniversary is like a big anniversary, so that makes it even harder. You walk around that memorial, it's still Wall Street. Like, you see businessmen that could have been my dad, but like they got to go home to their families after. But it's all very important, and I feel so much closer to him when I go there. I think it's weird being in New York because I'm about to go be with a bunch of people who have a shared experience with me in something that I felt pretty alone in my entire life. Sometimes people put this pressure on me and tell me that I'm so strong when I need to know it's okay to be weak today and just cry. Because it's good to feel these emotions, even though I wish I didn't have to.
The more I kept feeling that, my connection to that area was Steve and also this tragic event. That, if there was a way to start over or, allow a dream of ours that we had to, come alive. I thought, maybe that's something that we could pull up our bootstraps and dig up the courage to do.
My junior year of high school, I felt like I was learning the gravity of 9/11 and how much of an impact it had on the world. Growing up in a Japanese American household, especially as a female, you're put up on this pedestal to check all of these boxes and present as a perfect human, all while I'm grieving my dad's death and trying to understand it more. And I felt just so alone in that experience because we didn't talk about it, because we're not an emotional household, and that's just part of Asian culture. And I just got into this really, really negative headspace, and I just kept making mistakes and kept being told by my family that I wasn't good enough. Whether they said that explicitly or not, that's just how I internalized it. And I got to a point, kind of a breaking point, of just feeling like I was never gonna be good enough for my family. And I became so depressed with that thought. I feel so fucked up, and people expect me to be fucked up, so just let me ride that out. And that whole next few months, I just thought about dying every day, because when you're depressed, the only thing you can think about is how totally depressed you are. And it's so hard to find joy and get out of that headspace. I think being able to get outside was the only time where I could forget about how terrible my mind, the places it was going. Nature was my saving grace, and I just got to spend time alone with my thoughts and process everything that had happened to me in my life. And like, it felt like it would take the weight off of my shoulders. And it's also a place where I could like go talk to my dad and just like be okay with who I was. When I was so depressed, I obviously lost confidence in myself and lost faith in myself. And knowing that I could go skiing that day and feel that power is like how I found my way back to myself. When I like click into my skis, that's like what my dad taught me to do. And the fact that I like feel the most confident when I'm skiing makes me, it just like, I think that's like what my dad probably would have wanted. I think being able to like find my power through the thing that he showed me and the thing that he taught me is so special.
Skiing, like among other things, has helped me to see like, yeah, Dad was killed and thousands of people were killed on this one day for whatever reason. It's horrible, but that's not all that the world has to offer.
All of our lifestyle decisions would be something he'd probably even be jealous of maybe, but like looking down and being proud, like all of our lives are in the mountains, you know, and finding happiness there. And happiness, right? Like that's hard to get, especially after something like this.
Even though he's not here to experience that with me, it's like that level of freedom and joy and like confidence is so important. And like that's a life lesson to take away from like how much loss and grief I've experienced, because I just get to like escape that and like feel like I'm truly alive and I'm not controlled by the grief and I'm not defined by this like horrible day.
I wanna go to the mountains alone, by plane, take it home, throw out my phone, tell everyone I'm gone. I'll be back in a moment, remember that, keep track. 'Cause I got a soul that could eat yours whole. I got money in my pocket, pockets are sewn. I got a whole lot of something, nothing is right. So pull up a chair and stay the night. Stay the night.
Hi everyone, my name is Sierra Schlag. I'm sorry that I can't be there in person. I had a very delayed flight and a missed connection. But I just want to thank you all for being here, and thank you to Tuesday's Children for having this event. And this organization has been a part of my life since I was a kid, so feels super awesome and full circle to be here and talking to you. Yeah, about finding healing through storytelling. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so a little bit about me. I'm a professional skier based in the Roaring Fork Valley, which is where Aspen is in Colorado. But I was born in Bergen County, New Jersey. As you saw in the film, we had a cabin outside of Hunter, New York, that we went to pretty much every single weekend, and that's when I learned how to ski. And yeah, we moved to Park City when I was 9 and I started competing in moguls. And then I went to college at the University of Denver, started the freeride ski team there. And now I find myself as a professional skier and also working in marketing on a freelance basis. We can go to the next slide. And then I just want to talk about my dad and introduce him. His name is Sierra Schlag. And he worked on the 105th floor of the North Tower for Cantor Fitzgerald. He is the whole reason that my family loves the outdoors and loves skiing. I think in high school is kind of when he started going skiing and experiencing out the outdoors, and he just like really instilled that in all of us, especially with building that cabin upstate. We pretty much spent every single winter and school break and summers there, skiing, biking, canoeing, camping, making a ton of s'mores, and just hanging out outside. And then at the final slide of the film, you'll see that it's like in loving memory of Stephen Schlag, it's 88 and sunny. And that was his saying. I have it tattooed on my ribs. But people would ask him what the weather was like at the top of the ski hill, and he'd always say, it's 88 and sunny. And it's this quote that's kind of carried me through my life. And I think it's obviously applicable to weather, but it's also applicable to life in general. And no matter how dark and stormy things feel, there's always a bright side, and there's always it's 88 and sunny. So I think that's really helped me throughout the years. We can go to the next slide. Yeah, so what happened next, we'll kind of dive into the aftermath of 9/11. I think when we talk about 9/11, aftermath is always the term that is coined with it. And I think it's pretty applicable term because it was really chaotic after. And I was 5 years old when my dad passed away, so very young. And I didn't understand what death was or what was happening. And it was a very chaotic and confusing time. And trying to process the grief when you don't really understand what's going on is really difficult. And so I think I mirrored a lot of what other people around me were doing. And, as time went on, like our community in New Jersey was really amazing. And they really, they gave us meals and they took care of us. And my mom had to go be responsible and take care of business around my dad. And we slowly became the 9/11 family in the town we lived. And my mom would go grocery shopping a couple towns over, just to kind of like avoid the conversations and the pity. And I think me and my siblings all individually had uncomfortable situations happen to us. But I remember like around Father's Day when you would make little cards in class and people would tell me that I couldn't do it. And I think we just realized that New Jersey was becoming a toxic place, and it wasn't really a place that we wanted to stay. And so we moved to Park City, which, a little bit of backstory, Park City was our last family vacation altogether. We went there in February of 2001. And my parents kind of decided that we should move there. And so the plan was for us to go back to school and my mom to start doing some research. And obviously, my dad passed away pretty much right when we got back to school. So she put that on pause because she didn't want to change anything in our life that had already been flipped upside down. But in 2005, we finally made the move, and it was like the best decision my mom ever made. Growing up in Park City was awesome and incredible. And it was like this fresh start that she mentioned in the film. But I think with that fresh start, we avoided a lot of uncomfortable conversations. And I mean, I was in fourth grade, and the thought of like bringing up my dad dying in 9/11 to other fourth graders seemed kind of impossible. And so we just avoided it, and we didn't really talk about it as a family. We'd remember my dad on 9/11, but that's kind of the extent that we'd really talk about it. And so I think that just like led to like all of us kind of repressing our emotions around it a bit. And this was like before therapy was really normalized in society and a bigger conversation. But like as we grew up, I think in eighth or ninth grade, we all started going to therapy, which at that point in my life was horrible because I had repressed these emotions for so long. And then I had to open up about them, and it just felt like the sadness was never ending. And I don't think I've ever cried that hard in my life. And it was a battle with my mom of wanting to not go, but she made me, which in hindsight was really, really smart. But I think opening all of these emotions and bringing them back up just showed me the gravity of the situation. And yeah, I just like felt very alone in my experience because I didn't feel like I could talk to my friends about it because it was really heavy. And then we just didn't really talk about it at home. And so the summer going into my senior year of high school, I was diagnosed with clinical depression. And I, at that point, felt like I had succumbed to the trauma and the grief. And I felt really weak because everyone around us was like, "You're so strong. You've gotten through all of this." But this diagnosis kind of felt like I wasn't that like strong person people thought that I was. Um, and so, yeah, I got really depressed. When and the only way I could really release all of these emotions that I was feeling was getting outside. And so I was diagnosed in the summer and I really turned to trail running. We have a really great trail system in Park City, and I would just run for miles and miles and release all of this like pent up anger and sadness to kind of yeah, come back to myself and ground myself a little bit. And then as the seasons changed, I turned to skiing. And skiing is something I've been doing since I was 2 years old. It's what my dad taught me to do. And it's just like the funnest thing on the planet. I think if there are any skiers in the audience, you know, like going skiing with your best friends is like the best thing on earth. And it really taught me and showed me that I like had confidence and there was joy still in life. And it showed me that my community was still with me, even though I was going through this really difficult time. We can go to the next slide. And then I guess obviously time went on and I have found myself in this professional ski career. And there's a couple routes that you can take to be a pro skier. I think competition is kind of that first thing that people think of. But another route is to create films. And so I wanted to kind of like elevate my ski career a little bit. And I knew that film was kind of the next step to do it. And I felt like I was in a really good place in my healing journey and with therapy and everything that I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to tell my story there. And so I found one of my friends when I lived in Denver is a filmmaker. And so I turned to him because I was like, if I'm going to make a film about this, I need to work with someone that I really trust and that I can open up to. So that was really awesome that he was just happened to be a filmmaker. And I also got to share my 9/11 world. I think when I come back east, I live in Colorado now, so it's definitely a pilgrimage to come back east. And I've really only experienced it with my family and our family friends and you know, going to the museum and going to the memorial, it's a lot, but I've never shared it with my like outside community, I guess. And so being able to share that with him was really special and being able and like being like, this is not just like siloed in my life. It's something that people can learn a lot about what I've experienced from. And then throughout the film, like we sat down with each of my family members for like a couple hours and just interviewed them. And I got to learn so much more about my family's experiences, which was so helpful. And I think talking to my mom was really awesome because she has so many stories from my dad that, you know, we don't always bring up. And that was really cool to see. And it also made me analyze my relationship with skiing. I think skiing has always been like honestly my personality. Like I am a skier. I've been doing it for my whole life. But I've never really like thought critically about it and like my relationship with it. And for a while, like it was my lifeline and it is what connects me to my dad. And so being able to kind of yeah, like find the definition of like why skiing means so much was really important too. And then we got to share the film. And I think if any of you are filmmakers or artists or kind of anything where you have a finished product, being able to share it is equally nerve-wracking and amazing. And so obviously I was really wearing my heart on my sleeve with this film and putting myself out there, and that was really scary. But being able to have those conversations after people watched the film and connecting with the people who have also lost loved ones was like, I mean, the whole reason I made the film, it was so special and awesome. And I also wanted to create this film because, you know, living on the West Coast, a lot of people feel very disconnected from 9/11 and New York. And when you go to the East Coast, like, I don't know, people like get it and they understand. But as you move further west, I think it just, the impact decreases a bit. So I wanted to be able to share with these people like, hey, this happened to a real human being and this is the connection to it. And like, this is why you should care. And then the healing process. As I said, like putting myself out there, I thought I was like ready to do that, but I think thinking something and then actually doing it is totally different things. And it definitely pushed me to be able to obviously like public speak about it and get better at talking about it, which helped like so much in my healing, just because I was like having the conversations regularly. Um, and then obviously like understanding that I wasn't alone in my experience because there are so many people out there who are dealing with grief. And while there are only a select few people that are dealing with this specific grief, like grief is a shared human experience, and being able to connect with other people around that was really awesome. And then something I don't really mention in the film is going to therapy. I've been doing it since I was in high school, and therapy has just been like the best thing that I could do for my grief and my trauma, and suggest that everybody go to therapy, honestly. But yeah, we can go to the next slide. But yeah, so that was the first film that I ever worked on, and these are the other films that I've worked on since. Advice for Girls was kind of the most notable. It was a feature-length all-women ski film that toured around the entire country last year. And then Chop Your Own Wood was another short film, just talking about our relationship to nature as women. And we went to a cabin and skied powder and ate charcuterie. And then Nisei is the film I am releasing this fall, and it explores my Japanese American identity through the lens of skiing.
Sierra, thanks so much. First of all, the film was awesome. Really engaging, and I really enjoyed it. And it hit on a lot of points for me personally. I lost my dad when I was 18 in 9/11. And it's always interesting. I'm just sitting next to a dear friend. She was 10 years old. And so I appreciate the perspective of always the different ages and where you were, location. It was my first week of college. I lost my dad. I was in Los Angeles at Marymount, spent 3 semesters there before coming back to Boston College, and then moved to New York afterwards, right into the belly of the beast. And it was interesting because I know living in LA for a year and a half was almost like a good thing, because like no one really gave a shit, like no one. And so no one was freaking out, which was kind of good, because came back home and it was a totally different story. There's pros and cons to every situation. So I think it's more of an anecdote than anything. But I really appreciate your perspective and your openness, and your resilience. And I guess the one question I have is, diving into this world of 9/11 trauma, community recovery, Tuesday's Children, and being in Utah and kind of, being in here. How has that been for you? And how have you handled the obstacles? How have you handled the obstacles of maybe people not feeling the way you want them to feel about the story, or the messaging, or people that are saying they're going to help and don't necessarily always do that? And just that experience, kind of being so detached from New York for a long time, and then coming in hot.
Yeah, good question. I think coming to New York used to be like really, really difficult for me. I would dread it because I tell everyone, like, I have friends that live in New York, and I'm like, I would love to plan a trip here where it's like not based around my dead dad. So it is hard, and I think I've gotten better at managing it, but I also like come to New York every like 3 to 4 years, so it's not really that often. And I definitely mentally prepare myself to do so. And I think on your question, or like around your community and people like not showing up how you need, I think communicating that is hard, and I totally understand that. But I think I have just like over communicated of like how I need people to show up for me. And that's with my like tight knit group of friends. So that's like easier to do than just like a random person, because you're definitely going to interact with people who are not the best with handling the information that like your dad passed away in 9/11. And those definitely stick with you, and they're really, really hard. But I think the way other people react is a reflection on themselves and where they are at in their life experience, and not a reflection on who you are and your experience. And I think being able to kind of like detach that a little bit has been really helpful. And just like leaning on like that core group of friends, because like those are the interactions that like really matter, and the like one-off uncomfortable interactions with people that don't really understand. At the end of the day, you probably don't want to like have in your tight circles anyways. Did I answer all of your questions also?
Hi, my name's Marty, and thank you for sharing your story. I'm curious how you first got involved with Tuesday's Children, and what the relationship looks like now.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really remember the first time I like interacted with Tuesday Children. I remember going to an event in New York City and coming home with like a lot of teddy bears. And since then it's like they just put on events, I think when we were living in New Jersey, to help with the grieving process. And then when I was making this film, I reached out to them and then just shared the finished product, and we've kind of just been in touch ever since. Um, so yeah, it's kind of been a lot. Like we definitely interacted a lot when I was younger, but then more so in the past like couple of years.
Hi, my name is Joseph Green. I really enjoyed the film. I'm also a filmmaker, and I was wondering two things. One, what is it that you hoped the audience got out of Bloom when you first started the journey of it? Like, what was the gift of the film that you were hoping people would walk away with? And then, what did you learn about yourself in the process of making Bloom? Anything new?
Yeah. So in the ski industry, I think the films we were typically seeing is like Awesome Powder, Alaska, Big Lines, and there's not a lot of deep storytelling happening. And so I think after 2020, it kind of erupted a little bit of having deeper storytelling within the ski industry. And so I just like I wanted to tell my story, and I wanted people to connect. And like as I said in the film, like grief is this experience that I felt very alone in. And so being able to like make people feel less alone, especially in the ski industry, because like we're not having those conversations around mental health or grief, even though like we do lose a lot of people to skiing every year. And so I wanted to open up that conversation a little bit. And I also wanted to connect people with 9/11 because it does feel far away when you're on the West Coast. Um, and I think what I learned about myself was it's a good question of just like how I processed my grief a little bit. Like even I made that 3 years ago, so even watching it back now, I'm like, wow, I've grown a lot since I made this film, and I process my grief even differently now. But I think it's still evolving what I've learned from this film, because every time I watch it back, I'm like, wow, things have changed in my life since. So
Hi, my name's Andrew. I'm curious, who are some of the storytellers in your life that, have been role models? And curious how that has, influenced your work.
yeah, I think a lot of my peers in the ski industry, there are definitely a select few that are making really impactful and amazing films. One that comes to mind is Mallory Brown. He's a skier out of Bend, Oregon, and he has just been making a lot of, he's like tied in jazz with skiing, and it's like a very thoughtful way to tell his story. So he's someone I look up to a lot. And yeah, I think the ski industry still has a long way to go as far as filmmaking and deep storytelling goes. So I think there's a lot of room for growth there. And I think through like the couple films I've worked on, I've found a really amazing community and network of women filmmakers, and they're honestly so inspiring. And we're creating a lot of really great, impactful stories together, which has been really amazing too.